Imagine this. You wake up in the morning, sunlight peeks through the curtains, but before you even stretch your arms, your mind is already racing. Bills, health worries, appointments, unfinished tasks. Your heart pounds just a little faster. And without realizing it, your brain is quietly aging. Stress doesn't just weigh heavy on your shoulders. It etches invisible lines deep into your mind, changing the way your memory works, the way your emotions feel, and even how long your brain can stay sharp. What if I told you that stress could make a 60-year-old brain function like it's 75? And what if I also told you there are ways, backed by science, and simple enough to start today, that can reverse this silent aging process? Hey friends, welcome back to Wellness for Seniors, your channel for brain health and longevity. In today's video, we're diving deep into a topic that touches almost every single one of us: stress. Not just the everyday annoyance of traffic jams or waiting in line, but the kind of persistent, low-grade stress that slowly wears down the body and mind. Researchers now know that chronic stress is one of the most powerful accelerators of brain aging. But here's the good news. New science also shows that the brain has remarkable resilience. It can heal, rewire, and even grow new cells if we learn how to lift the burden of stress. By the end of this video, you'll not only understand how stress actually ages your brain, but also exactly what you can do to turn the clock back, calming your mind, protecting your memory, and preserving sharpness well into your later years. Think about this. Why do some seniors remain mentally sharp and emotionally steady well into their 80s and 90s, while others struggle with brain fog, forgetfulness, or even dementia much earlier? Genetics play a role, yes. But one of the strongest differences researchers see is how the brain responds to stress across a lifetime. Here's the shocking truth. When you feel stress, your body floods with a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol is useful in small doses. It helps you react to danger, gives you a quick burst of energy, sharpens your focus. But when cortisol is always there, day after day, year after year, it becomes toxic. It literally shrinks the hippocampus, the part of your brain responsible for memory and learning. In one study, older adults with high levels of cortisol consistently performed worse on memory tests. Brain scans revealed their hippocampus volume was significantly smaller compared to peers with lower stress hormones. The effect wasn't subtle. It was equivalent to several extra years of brain aging. Let me tell you about Mary, a 68-year-old retired teacher. She always prided herself on her memory. She could recall the names of every student she taught over 40 years. But in her mid-60s, after her husband's illness and the mounting stress of caregiving, she noticed she was forgetting simple things, where she left her keys, appointments with friends, even the endings of books she had just finished. When she finally went in for a checkup, her doctor explained something she had never considered. It's not that your brain is broken, Mary. It's that stress has been stealing your memory. Mary's story is not rare. Millions of seniors experience the same quiet erosion, not realizing that stress is the invisible hand behind their brain decline. So here's the question. If stress can steal memory, can lowering stress give it back? Can your brain actually grow younger if you calm your nervous system? The science says yes. But before we dive into the solutions, we need to fully understand the hidden ways stress ages your brain. Not just memory, but emotions, decision-making, even your risk for Alzheimer's. Stress doesn't only damage the hippocampus. It also disrupts the prefrontal cortex, the executive center of your brain that handles planning, attention, and judgment. That's why under stress, people make impulsive decisions, misplace things, or lose track of time. And here's another overlooked impact. Chronic stress accelerates inflammation in the brain, which scientists now believe is a direct pathway to Alzheimer's disease. A groundbreaking study from the University of California followed seniors over a decade and found that those reporting high stress levels were nearly 3 times more likely to develop mild cognitive impairment, often a precursor to dementia. 3 times. Now, I don't share this to scare you, but to empower you. Because once you know the hidden cost of stress, you gain the power to fight back. You realize that every breath, every moment of calm, every positive habit you build isn't just about feeling relaxed. It's literally rewiring and protecting your brain. So here's what we'll uncover together. how stress silently rewires your brain in ways you don't notice until it's too late. The emotional traps that keep stress alive in your daily life. And most importantly, the simple, science-backed ways to reverse the damage. But let me ask you this before we continue. When was the last time you felt truly relaxed? Not just sitting in front of the TV, but deeply calm. The kind of calm that makes your shoulders drop and your breath slow? If you can't remember, it might be your brain's way of telling you something. In the next part, we'll break down exactly what stress does inside your brain, step by step, so you can see the hidden fingerprints of stress in your own daily life. When most people think about stress, they imagine something temporary, a racing heartbeat during an argument, sweaty palms before giving a speech, or the restless feeling of waiting for important news. But what scientists now understand is that stress is not just an emotional experience. It is a physical process, one that leaves behind biological fingerprints inside the brain itself. To see the true impact, let's take a slow walk through the main regions of the brain and discover how each is affected when stress lingers for too long. We'll start with the hippocampus, the brain's memory center. You can picture the hippocampus as a kind of internal librarian, carefully cataloging experiences, filing them into long-term memory, and retrieving them when you need to recall a name, an event, or the directions to a familiar place. Under normal conditions, this librarian works tirelessly and efficiently. But when cortisol, the main stress hormone, floods the system day after day, the librarian becomes exhausted. The shelves get disorganized. Whole books of memory seem to go missing. And over time, chronic stress actually damages the very cells of the hippocampus. Brain imaging studies reveal that people under constant stress show shrinkage in this area, sometimes by as much as 10% compared to those with lower stress levels. That might sound like just a number, but in practice it means more forgotten conversations, misplaced objects, and a nagging sense of mental fog. Next, let's look at the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that sits just behind your forehead. If the hippocampus is the librarian, then the prefrontal cortex is the wise manager, the one who organizes your day, helps you resist distractions, and makes sound decisions. But stress is like an unruly crowd barging into the manager's office, scattering papers, yelling, demanding attention. The result? Focus weakens. Decisions become impulsive. Planning falls apart. For seniors, this disruption can be especially dangerous. Forgetting to pay a bill, misjudging when it's safe to cross a busy street, or making hasty choices about finances. These can all trace back to a stressed and overburdened prefrontal cortex. Then there's the amygdala, the brain's emotional alarm bell. Under short-term stress, the amygdala is useful. It keeps you alert to danger, primes your body to react. But under chronic stress, the amygdala becomes hyperactive, like a smoke detector that goes off every time you toast bread. This constant false alarm can trap you in cycles of anxiety, irritability, and even depression. For older adults, it can feel like an emotional roller coaster, snapping at loved ones, worrying over small details, or lying awake at night replaying past mistakes. What's even more concerning is how these regions interact. A weakened hippocampus struggles to regulate the amygdala, so emotions spiral out of control. A disrupted prefrontal cortex fails to calm the overactive alarm, so anxiety dominates. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle, one that accelerates brain aging far faster than the calendar alone. Scientists now talk about stress in terms of toxic load, the cumulative burden of cortisol, inflammation, and disrupted brain networks. This toxic load doesn't just cause temporary forgetfulness or mood swings. It changes the physical structure of the brain. Dendrites, the tiny branches that connect brain cells, wither under stress, reducing communication between neurons. Neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells, slows down. White matter, the wiring that carries messages across brain regions, becomes less efficient. It is, quite literally, like watching a city's power grid dim and falter. One study from Yale University painted a striking picture. Older adults with chronic stress showed patterns of brain connectivity that resembled much older brains. Their neural age exceeded their chronological age by as much as a decade. In other words, stress didn't just make them feel older, it made their brains function as if they truly were. And it doesn't stop there. Stress also fuels inflammation, the silent spark that ignites many age-related diseases. When cortisol lingers, it disturbs the immune system, creating a low-grade fire in the brain. This fire quietly damages neurons, sets the stage for plaques and tangles linked to Alzheimer's, and accelerates vascular changes that raise the risk of stroke. It's no wonder that scientists now call stress a public health epidemic, not because of what it does to mood in the moment, but because of the long shadows it casts over memory, cognition, and emotional stability. But before you feel overwhelmed, let's step back and look at a more hopeful perspective. Because within this dark picture lies something extraordinary. The brain is not static. It is plastic. That means it has the ability to adapt, heal, and rewire itself even in later years. Seniors who learn to manage stress show not only improved mood, but measurable growth in hippocampal volume, stronger prefrontal activity, and calmer amygdala responses. The librarian can reorganize the shelves. The wise manager can regain control of the office. The alarm bell can quiet down. Think of it this way. Every time you practice calm breathing, every time you take a mindful walk, every time you share a laugh with a friend, you're not just easing your mood. You are literally reshaping your brain's architecture. It's like giving the city's power grid new wires, brighter lights, and more efficient connections. So let me ask you, have you noticed how your own brain feels under stress? Do you find yourself forgetting simple things when you're anxious, or making snap decisions you later regret? Have you felt your emotions swing more wildly than they used to? These aren't signs of weakness. They are the fingerprints of stress on your brain. And recognizing them is the first step to reversing the damage. In the next section, we'll uncover the emotional traps that keep stress alive in daily life. Habits and thought patterns that sneak into your routine and quietly age your brain without you even realizing it. And more importantly, we'll begin to explore how to break free from them, one step at a time. If stress were only about sudden emergencies, like slamming on the brakes to avoid an accident or rushing to help a child who's fallen, our brains could handle it. Those short bursts are what our biology was designed for. But the stress that ages your brain doesn't come in sharp explosions. It comes in whispers, in routines, in the subtle traps that keep your body on edge even when nothing obvious is happening. One of the biggest traps is the cycle of worry. Worry often feels productive, as if turning a problem over and over in your mind will eventually solve it. But for the brain, worry is like leaving the faucet running all day. Cortisol drips steadily, never shutting off, flooding the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex until they begin to falter. Seniors often worry about health, about finances, about family. And while the concerns are real, the endless mental rehearsal does not create solutions. Instead, it creates wear and tear. There's a striking study that followed older adults who described themselves as chronic worriers. Compared to their more relaxed peers, these individuals had higher cortisol, more sleep disturbances, and significantly lower performance on memory tasks. It wasn't the problems themselves that harmed the brain. It was the constant mental loop of anticipating trouble. The brain aged not because of the stressor, but because of the stress response that never shut down. Another trap lies in isolation. Humans are wired for connection, and the brain thrives on social interaction. But stress often pushes people inward. When overwhelmed, many retreat from friends, decline invitations, or avoid calls. For seniors, this withdrawal can become even more pronounced, especially after retirement, loss of a spouse, or mobility challenges. Unfortunately, isolation magnifies stress rather than relieving it. Without the buffering effect of companionship, the amygdala remains hyperactive, the prefrontal cortex struggles to regulate mood, and the hippocampus receives fewer stimulating conversations to keep it sharp. Think of George, a 72-year-old widower. After his wife passed, he told himself he just needed some time alone. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. His circle of friends stopped calling, assuming he preferred space. George found himself watching television for hours, but instead of relaxing, he felt restless and anxious. His doctor explained why. Social withdrawal had become a stress amplifier, tricking his nervous system into constant vigilance. The very thing he thought would calm him, solitude, was quietly aging his brain. Sleep is another hidden trap. Stress steals sleep, and poor sleep magnifies stress, a vicious cycle. When you lie awake at night, Replaying conversations or worrying about tomorrow's to-do list, your body continues pumping cortisol. The brain never receives the downtime it needs to clean out toxins, consolidate memories, and reset emotional balance. Studies show that even a few nights of poor sleep can mimic the effects of brain aging: slower recall, poor focus, and mood swings. Over time, chronic insomnia doubles the risk of cognitive decline in seniors. Yet many shrug it off as just part of getting older, not realizing it is stress taking its toll. Then there are the daily habits that seem harmless but quietly feed the stress loop. Constant news consumption, for example. The brain evolved to treat alarming information as immediate danger. Watching negative headlines day after day convinces the amygdala that threats are everywhere. Even though you are sitting safely in your living room, your nervous system reacts as if disaster is unfolding at your door. Multitasking is another culprit. Juggling phone calls, emails, chores, and background noise might feel efficient, but it forces the brain to constantly switch gears. Each switch triggers a mini stress response. Over months and years, this continual fragmentation wears down the brain's ability to sustain deep focus, leaving you more frazzled and less resilient. And let's not forget perfectionism. Many seniors spent their working lives striving for excellence, holding themselves to high standards. But in retirement, the same perfectionism can turn into self-criticism. Cooking a meal that isn't perfect, forgetting a detail, or misplacing an item becomes a source of frustration rather than acceptance. That frustration is stress in disguise, small but cumulative, eroding the brain's calm like tiny waves against a shoreline. Here's what makes these traps so insidious. They don't feel like stress in the traditional sense. You might not feel your heart racing or your palms sweating. Instead, they show up as tension in your shoulders, a restless mind at night, or a creeping sense of irritability during the day. But underneath, cortisol and inflammation are quietly at work, shaving years off your brain's resilience. The hopeful truth is that recognizing these traps is the first step to escaping them. Once you see worry for what it is, a chemical drip of cortisol, you can begin to interrupt it. Once you realize isolation is not peace, but a stress amplifier, you can take small steps toward connection. Once you understand that poor sleep is not just inconvenience, but a threat to memory, you can prioritize rest with the seriousness it deserves. Think for a moment. Which of these traps shows up in your own life? Do you catch yourself worrying about health appointments weeks in advance? Do you spend more time alone than you'd like, convincing yourself it's easier that way? Do you lie awake, mind racing, while the clock ticks past midnight? These aren't just habits. They are stress pathways carving grooves in your brain. The empowering part is that every groove can be softened. Every habit can be rewired. The brain, remember, is plastic. It responds to new input, even in later years. Just as stress can age the brain, intentional changes can help it grow young again. In the next part, we'll move from recognizing the traps to learning the tools. Practical, science-backed methods that not only reduce stress in the moment, but actually reverse its damage in the brain. Because understanding the enemy is important, but learning how to win the battle is what truly matters. Now that we've seen how stress quietly sneaks into daily life and accelerates brain aging, the question becomes, what can you actually do about it? The answer is more encouraging than many expect. While we cannot eliminate every source of stress, life will always bring challenges, losses, and uncertainty. We can dramatically change the way our brains and bodies respond to it. And when that response shifts, the aging process itself begins to slow and, in many cases, reverse. The first and most powerful tool is breathing. It sounds almost too simple, but controlled breathing has been shown to calm the nervous system more effectively than many medications. When you take slow, deep breaths, especially with an extended exhale, you signal the parasympathetic nervous system, the body's natural rest and digest mode, to take over. Cortisol levels drop, heart rate steadies, and brain activity shifts away from the amygdala and back toward the prefrontal cortex. In studies with older adults, practicing just 10 minutes of mindful breathing each day improved memory performance, reduced anxiety, and even increased gray matter density in the hippocampus over time. Imagine that. Something as gentle as breathing can literally regrow parts of your brain. Next is movement. Exercise is often thought of as a way to strengthen the heart and muscles, but its effects on the brain are equally profound. Aerobic activities, walking, swimming, cycling, even gardening at a brisk pace, boost levels of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, often called fertilizer for the brain. This protein encourages the growth of new neurons and strengthens the connections between them. Exercise also helps regulate sleep and reduces inflammation, both of which are crucial for reversing stress damage. Seniors who engage in regular physical activity show sharper memory and slower cognitive decline than sedentary peers, regardless of genetic risk. The key is not intensity, but consistency. 30 minutes of moderate movement most days is enough to start rebuilding resilience. Another underrated method is mindfulness and meditation. For centuries, spiritual traditions have taught the value of stillness. Today, neuroscience explains why. Meditation reduces the activity of the default mode network, the brain system that fuels rumination and worry. By quieting this chatter, meditation gives the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex a chance to recover. Brain scans of long-term meditators reveal thicker, gray matter in areas related to attention and emotional regulation, even in their 70s and 80s. You don't have to sit cross-legged for hours. Even 5 minutes of focused awareness, on your breath, on sounds, or on gentle body sensations, begins to shift the brain away from stress pathways and toward healing ones. Social connection is another antidote. Remember George, who isolated himself after losing his wife. When he eventually joined a local walking group, something remarkable happened. His mood improved, his sleep deepened, and his doctor noticed better blood pressure and memory test results within months. Human interaction releases oxytocin, sometimes called the bonding hormone, which directly counteracts cortisol's damaging effects. Laughter with a friend, sharing stories, or even gentle touch like holding hands can activate brain circuits that reduce fear and calm the amygdala. Seniors with strong social ties consistently live longer and maintain sharper cognition than those who remain isolated. Connection is not a luxury, it is medicine. Nature also offers healing. Spending time outdoors lowers cortisol, reduces blood pressure, and restores mental clarity. Japanese researchers call it forest bathing, simply walking among trees, listening to birds, and breathing in fresh air. In older adults, regular time in natural settings has been linked to reduced depression, better sleep, and slower cognitive decline. Even tending a small garden, sitting by a window with plants, or listening to recordings of natural sounds can provide some of these benefits. The brain seems to recognize nature as home, and in that familiarity, stress melts away. Nutrition plays a subtler but equally important role. Stress often drives cravings for sugar, caffeine, and processed comfort foods. Yet, these choices fuel inflammation and disrupt the brain's delicate chemistry. On the other hand, diets rich in omega-3 fatty acids, antioxidants, and whole foods provide the raw materials the brain needs to repair itself. Fatty fish, leafy greens, berries, nuts, and olive oil all support neurogenesis and reduce the oxidative stress that ages brain cells. In one large study, seniors who followed a Mediterranean-style diet had nearly a 30% lower risk of cognitive decline, even when exposed to high levels of life stress. Food, in other words, can either amplify stress or shield you from it. And then there is sleep, the overlooked pillar. To reverse stress damage, the brain desperately needs rest. During deep sleep, the brain clears out toxins, repairs neural connections, and consolidates memory. Skimping on sleep is like skipping the cleanup crew after a busy day. Clutter piles up, and performance suffers. Fortunately, seniors who improve their sleep hygiene, keeping a consistent bedtime, limiting screens before bed, creating a cool, dark sleeping environment, often notice improved mood and sharper thinking within weeks. Some even experience fewer aches and pains, since stress-related inflammation drops as sleep improves. One of the most empowering findings from recent research is that these strategies don't work in isolation. They reinforce each other. A short walk makes it easier to fall asleep. Good sleep makes it easier to focus during meditation. Social connection makes it easier to stick with healthy eating. It's like building a web of resilience, where each strand strengthens the others, and together they hold the brain safe from the weight of stress. It's worth pausing to remember Mary, the retired teacher whose memory began to falter under caregiving stress. When she started practicing breathing exercises, joined a book club for social connection, and took daily walks, her symptoms didn't vanish overnight. But within 6 months, she noticed she could remember the endings of novels again. Her doctor told her that her hippocampus showed signs of recovery. Mary often says now, "I thought I was losing myself, but it turns out I just needed to give my brain a chance to heal." So ask yourself, which of these tools feels most approachable for you right now? Is it a 5-minute breathing practice before bed? A daily walk around the block? Calling a friend you haven't spoken to in a while? You don't need to change everything at once. The brain responds to even the smallest shifts. Every calm breath, every moment of laughter, every night of deep rest is a vote for a younger, healthier brain. In the next section, we'll explore something even deeper: how mindset and meaning shape the way stress affects you. Because beyond biology and lifestyle, the way you interpret and respond to life's challenges can be the most powerful factor in whether stress breaks you down or builds you up. We've looked at the biology of stress and the practical tools to calm it, but there's another layer that scientists are only beginning to fully appreciate: mindset. The way you think about stress can shape the way your body responds to it. This might sound almost too simple to be true, but studies show that perception alone can change whether stress erodes your brain or strengthens it. Consider this: 2 people may face the same challenge. Let's say, caring for an ill spouse. One views it as an unbearable burden, a constant source of exhaustion. The other, though equally tired, interprets it as an act of love, a way of giving meaning to their days. Both feel stress. Both release cortisol, but the health outcomes diverge. The first shows faster brain aging, more inflammation, and poorer immune response. The second, while still under pressure, displays resilience, stronger memory performance, and slower decline. Why? Because the brain interprets the experience through the lens of meaning. Psychologists call this stress mindset. In one groundbreaking study at Harvard, researchers found that people who believed stress was harmful had worse health outcomes: higher blood pressure, more fatigue, greater memory problems, than those who believed stress could be useful, even when both groups faced similar pressures. In fact, the stresses-enhancing group had better performance on tests of focus and memory. Belief literally rewired biology. This doesn't mean you should pretend stress feels good or deny the toll it takes. Rather, it means reframing stress as a signal, a reminder of what matters, an opportunity to grow, a challenge that can strengthen you instead of break you. When the mind interprets stress differently, the body responds differently, too. Cortisol peaks, but then falls more quickly. Inflammation subsides. The hippocampus receives bursts of stimulation instead of steady erosion. Take, for example, Rosa, a 70-year-old grandmother who suddenly found herself caring for 3 grandchildren after her daughter fell ill. At first, she felt overwhelmed, her nights restless, her memory faltering. But when she began to view the situation not as punishment, but as privilege, a chance to pass on her stories, to shape young lives, her health markers improved. She still faced stress, but her brain no longer bore the same scars. In fact, she reported feeling sharper, more present, and more emotionally balanced than she had in years. Meaning doesn't just soften stress, it transforms it. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, famously observed that humans can endure almost any how if they have a why. Modern neuroscience agrees. Seniors with a strong sense of purpose show reduced risk of Alzheimer's, slower memory decline, and better resilience to stress. Purpose seems to act like a shield, protecting neurons from damage. It's as if the brain, when fueled by meaning, becomes less vulnerable to the corrosive effects of cortisol. Gratitude is another mindset tool with profound effects. Writing down just 3 things you're grateful for each day has been shown to lower cortisol, improve sleep, and increase hippocampal activity. Gratitude shifts attention away from constant threat scanning and toward positive memory formation. For the aging brain, this shift is vital. It creates pathways of calm, reinforcing resilience instead of fragility. Even forgiveness plays a role. Holding on to resentment keeps the amygdala active, tricking the brain into perceiving ongoing danger. Forgiveness, on the other hand, quiets the stress response, lowers blood pressure, and restores emotional balance. Seniors who practice forgiveness regularly report fewer memory lapses and lower levels of cognitive decline. It is not just a moral choice, it is neurological medicine. But how do you cultivate a new mindset in practice? One way is through reframing questions. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you can ask, "What can I learn from this? How can this make me stronger?" Another is storytelling. When you share your challenges with friends or write them down in a journal, your brain reprocesses the event, placing it in a broader narrative instead of looping endlessly in worry. This helps the prefrontal cortex regain control over the amygdala. Another technique is called cognitive reappraisal. When a stressful event arises, pause and reinterpret it. For example, if your heart races before speaking in public, instead of telling yourself, "I'm anxious," you might say, "My body is giving me energy to do well." Studies show that this subtle shift turns stress from a brain-aging burden into a brain-activating spark. Let's not forget spirituality. Whether through prayer, meditation, or a sense of connection to something larger than oneself, spiritual practices consistently reduce stress and protect the brain. In seniors, regular spiritual engagement is associated with thicker cortical regions and better memory performance. It seems that belief, hope, and connection to meaning tap into the deepest wiring of the brain, calming the storms of stress at their root. Now, you might be wondering, can changing mindset really reverse years of stress damage? The answer appears to be yes. Not overnight, not with a single thought, but gradually, like drops of water reshaping stone. Studies show that seniors who adopt positive stress mindsets experience not only better mood, but measurable improvements in brain function. Their memory tests improve, their sleep deepens, their biological markers of inflammation decline. The shift is slow, but steady and profoundly real. Think of your brain as a garden. Stress is like a weed, invasive, persistent. You cannot always control when weeds appear, but you can control whether you let them overrun the soil. Mindset is the gardener's hand. Gratitude waters the flowers. Purpose fertilizes the soil. Forgiveness pulls the weeds. With time, the brain grows more resilient, less fragile, and even more beautiful than before. So let me ask you, how do you currently frame stress in your life? Do you see it as a thief, stealing your calm? Or can you begin to see it as a teacher, pointing to what matters most? That choice may be the single greatest factor in whether your brain ages faster or slower than the calendar says. In the final section, we'll bring everything together: biology, habits, mindset, into a roadmap for protecting and even rejuvenating your brain. Because while stress is universal, how you respond to it determines whether it becomes your undoing or your greatest catalyst for growth. We've come a long way on this journey together, from understanding the silent fingerprints of stress on the brain, to recognizing the hidden traps that keep it alive, to uncovering practical tools and the transformative power of mindset. If there's one message to carry forward, it's this: stress does not have to be the thief of your memory or the architect of your decline. With awareness, intention, and practice, stress can actually become the turning point that leads you toward a younger, sharper, more resilient brain. Think back to Mary, the retired teacher who thought she was losing herself, or George, who discovered that isolation was quietly draining his strength until he stepped into connection again, or Rosa, who reframed caregiving from burden to blessing. These aren't just stories. They are living proof that the brain at 60, 70, even 80 is not a fragile relic of the past. It is a living, changing, adapting organ, waiting for cues on whether to wither under stress or to bloom through resilience. Science confirms this again and again. Seniors who practice mindful breathing see hippocampal growth. Those who walk daily build new neural connections. Those who nurture purpose and gratitude display younger brain patterns than their peers. The evidence is overwhelming. Your brain is not locked in decline. It listens to your choices, your habits, your perspective, and it changes accordingly. So what does this mean in practice? It means that every small step counts. You don't need to overhaul your life overnight. Start with one gentle shift. Tonight, before bed, take 5 slow breaths, lengthening each exhale. Tomorrow, walk for 10 minutes outdoors, noticing the colors of the trees, the rhythm of your steps. This week, call a friend, share a laugh. Remind your brain what connection feels like. Write down one thing you're grateful for, no matter how small. Each of these acts may seem tiny, but together they weave a new story for your brain. A story not of decline, but of renewal. Here's something remarkable. In longitudinal studies, seniors who consistently practiced just a few of these habits had brains that aged more slowly, sometimes appearing a decade younger on cognitive tests. Some even showed improvements in areas where decline had already begun. This means it is never too late. The window of healing is always open, as long as you choose to step through it. There's also freedom in remembering that stress is not your enemy. It is your body's way of reminding you what matters. The challenge is not to erase stress, but to harness it, to guide its energy toward growth, learning, and connection instead of erosion. In this way, stress becomes less like a storm that batters you and more like the wind that fills your sails, carrying you forward. Picture yourself 5 years from now. Do you want to be more forgetful, more anxious, weighed down by the invisible years that stress adds to your brain? Or do you want to feel sharper, calmer, more present, enjoying conversations, remembering stories, savoring moments with family? That future is being shaped right now, in the small choices you make each day. The payoff is not just personal. When you care for your brain, you also care for the people around you. A calmer, sharper mind means deeper conversations with grandchildren, steadier decisions in daily life, and a stronger sense of joy in relationships. You don't just extend your own quality of life. You gift presence and clarity to those who love you. And so, the roadmap becomes clear. Number 1, calm the nervous system with breath, movement, and sleep. Number 2, protect the brain with nourishing foods and restorative environments. Number 3, strengthen resilience through connection, gratitude, and forgiveness. Number 4, reframe stress as a signal of meaning, not a sentence of decline. Follow this path, and you'll not only slow the aging of your brain, you'll feel the weight of stress lifting, revealing a mind that is lighter, clearer, and more alive. As we close, I invite you to take one action today. Choose the habit that speaks to you most and begin. Maybe it's a walk, maybe a phone call, maybe a moment of gratitude. Start there and let the momentum build. And if you found this video valuable, let's keep this journey going together. Subscribe to Wellness for Seniors for more science-backed strategies to keep your brain young and your life full of vitality. Share this video with someone you care about, because the truth is, stress touches us all, and so does the hope of resilience. And let me know in the comments, which of these practices will you start today to reverse the toll of stress on your brain? Remember, the brain is always listening. What story will you tell it? Will you let stress carve lines of decline, or will you write a new story of strength, calm, and renewal? The choice is yours, and your brain is ready to follow.